Hello and welcome to News Central Now, coming to you live from our studio in Nigeria. I am Benga Aborowa, and these are the headlines at this hour. Mali's interim government to hold presidential and parliamentary elections next year. The United Nations World Food Programme warns of potential famine in South Sudan. And the Ugandan government admits detaining over 1,000 people in run-up to January's election. We'll bring you all the details shortly. We begin the news in West Africa, where the Nigerian army has put in place measures to forestall any planned attacks on airports and correctional facilities in the southwest of the country. During an interactive session with defense correspondents in Lagos on Thursday, the General Officer commanding 81 Division of the Nigerian Army, Major General Lawrence Fejoku, said that the army is collaborating with other security agencies towards repelling any terrorist incursion. General Fejoku also appealed to the citizens with security intelligence to approach the division.
That we are not sleeping over it. There are platforms on which the various security agencies meet. But one thing I think I should throw light on here is that, gradually everybody now wants the military, the army particularly, to provide answers to everything. Apart from our core mandate, from time to time we are given tasks. We try to carry out these tasks in the midst of fighting insurgency and all manner of violent crimes across the country. So it's also important that we free up ourselves to an extent so that other security agencies will do their work. That is what the NI is. And whenever what they are trying to manage begins to overwhelm them and we are tasked to give them support, I like to be proactive in the way I do my things. And being proactive entails sound intelligence gathering, interface with other security agencies, a good plan of action, and where necessary, a good plan for reaction.
Now, joining us live is the former Air Officer commanding Tactical Air Command, Nigerian Air Force, with its headquarters at Makurdi, Benue State. Retired Air Vice Marshal Femi Gbadebo joins me on the Primetime News for an expert's perspective on this worrying menace and possible solutions. Good evening, Air Vice Marshal Gbadebo.
Good evening, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Now, Amotekun, Ebubeagu, civilian JTF, and there's a lot of proliferation of civilian security and vigilante groups that pose more problems, or is it the ideal response to the intractable security challenges facing us as a nation? What do you make of all of this?
There is a level of lack of coordination in what is going on. We are getting what I'll say the high-level aspect of the information. You have a name, you have a brand, but exactly how the brand is going to function, and I mean structure, an organogram to show how you're breaking up. If you have a security architecture for either a state or an area, let's use a state for example, you'll have the headquarters of the security architecture. You'll break it down into, let's say, each of the local governments. Mm-hmm. And then you'll be talking about number of men and then the kind of arms and ammunition that will be available to them and the training that these men will be given. You can't just recruit people off the streets, put uniform on them, or even the vigilantes that are already there and suddenly say you have an armed group. Because what makes a military organization functional is that there's a clear hierarchy and there's a command and control structure that lets you know that A is senior to B and C and D and so on. So if there's a crisis where D is operating, if B shows up, D takes over control. If we don't have that set up, we will have problems within the structure itself and then with other security agencies that are working there. So I think all the various governments and regional agencies that are coming up with this architectural structure should quickly sit down, get those who know what to do to help them to draw up this framework. It is only when we see a clear framework that we can understand how these people are going to be effective in doing what they have been asked to do.
Now, Avian Badible, the reason why this state government and some governors have come up with this is to replace the vacuum. It's because there's been a breakdown in law and order, and traditional security agencies have not been able to live up to expectations. So what urgent steps can the government take to stop the lack of trust and belief in the security in this country? Because all this Amotekun, Ebubuagu is just self-help, because the people feel, you know, the traditional security architecture has failed them.
Well, you see, what happened in the past where the state governments started supporting the police organizations in their state, and it started slowly until we saw states like Lagos State spending huge amounts of money, buying vehicles and other things for them, which from my experience were not properly managed by the police themselves. And at some stage, people started to think, why don't we have our own organizational structure that we can manage? And so they came up with this thing. Lagos is doing well with LASMA and some other organizations giving specific roles with traffic management and so on. And we're seeing the structures working. But when you now come up with what you call a security organization to take care of the security crisis you're having in that area, you must also come up with this structure. A situation where every governor is looking like the commander-in-chief of the security structure means obviously something's wrong. They can have a rotational chairmanship of this security structure, but the top, wearing the uniforms, having a few men on parade to show that you have now started and some vehicles, that is not it. That's what I'm saying, that it takes a little, maybe just some workshops and conferences to draw up a framework, get the people who know, and I'm talking about the military, or retired military, and then looking at your state or the area concerned and deciding where you want to put certain pockets of people and how many people do you want to recruit.
Because the situation, again, the situation is peculiar to individual states, and you can't have the same solution across board. I get your point. Now, from the DMI to the National Intelligence Agency to the DSS and other paramilitary units, it looks like miscreants and mischief makers are taking advantage of the poor interagency collaboration. This always comes up in conversations when you talk about security in Nigeria. They always talk about interagency rivalry and lack of collaboration. What are the options available for Nigeria right now?
The options, like I said, is for proper structure. And I'm talking about you are bringing in a new architecture, structure it well. Let's take the United States, for example. You have police at different levels. And what happens is that the lower level police have their jurisdiction. It can be within a subsector of the local government. And there's somebody for the local government, an organization for the local government, and there's an organization for the state. So if anybody, if there's a crisis beyond them, they call in the higher structure, or the higher structure moves in and takes over control. This is what I'm saying, that you are setting up something, you must make it clear, make it plain for everybody to see how you're organized and your good intentions, and so that there will be no misunderstanding. And then what is the level of training? I'm not talking of just military training, but the background of the people that you're bringing to set up this structure. That's how you can bring the agencies together to begin to work well. And as far as intelligence is concerned, we don't even need people in uniform to gather intelligence. And if you get the right intelligence agencies to work with you, we will go back to a level where right from the smallest settlement level, where you have an organized traditional ruler, like the ones we call Bale in Lagos and so on. These people will be the ones who are feeding you information going upwards.
So it's a collective...
So nobody comes into that area and settles without being identified and known.
It's a collective effort, and collaboration is needed at all levels, not just from military and security agencies.
And transparency.
And transparency. Thank you very much, retired Air Vice Marshal Femi Gbadebo. We do appreciate your insights, and thanks for joining us on the news this evening.
Thank you for having me. Have a lovely evening.
Now, staying in Nigeria, where the government has blamed the media and some unpatriotic citizens for Twitter's choice of Ghana over Nigeria for the siting of its continental headquarters. The Minister of Information and Culture, Alhaji Lai Mohammed, believes that with about 25 million users against Ghana's 8 million users, Nigeria should have been Twitter's choice to locate its headquarters in Africa. He says the development will serve as a lesson for Nigerians to be patriotic in managing the image of the country.
The natural expectation would have been for Nigeria to be the hub for Twitter, especially in this part of Africa. Even the fact that we have about 25 or so million Twitter users in Nigeria against 8 million Twitter users in Accra. So clearly the decision was not a commercial one, a business one. But I think Twitter has the prerogative and exclusive rights as to where to site its headquarters. But I hope that this will serve as a lesson to Nigerians for citing its headquarters in Accra, Ghana. Is that Accra, Ghana is a champion of democracy, it's rule of law in Accra, among other reasons.
Staying in West Africa, Mali's interim government has announced it will hold presidential and parliamentary elections in February next year. Lieutenant Colonel Abdoulaye Maiga, the Minister for Territorial Administration, told journalists that the first round of voting will take place on the 27th of February, with the second round to be held in March. According to the government, announcing the date is a sign of its commitment to strictly uphold a pledge of an 18-month transition to an elected civilian government. Mali was plunged into a political crisis after Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta was ousted from office in August last year following mass civilian protests against its administration over corruption, the mismanagement of the economy and the fight against Islamist insurgents. We now move to East Africa, where the Somali government is standing by its decision to extend the President Mohamed Farmajo's term. A Somali Foreign Affairs Ministry says comments from international quarters misconstrue Somalia's commitment to upholding the democratic rights of the people to choose their leadership. It has also criticized the international community for seeking to undermine the country's democratic processes. Somalia's lower house of parliament on Monday extended the president's term in office by 2 years. The ministry considered it regrettable that as champions of democracy, Somalia's global partners have failed to support the people's democratic aspirations exercised through Parliament's decision. And joining me this evening to discuss this is News Central's correspondent in East Africa. We'll get back to him during the course of the bulletin. Now, you're watching News Central's Primetime News. When we return, South African journalist and editor Diane Hawker will be telling us about the latest on former President Jacob Zuma's case. Stay with us. You're welcome back. Now, more than 7 million people in South Sudan will suffer acute food insecurity over the coming few months in efforts to be focused on stopping a potential famine. This is according to the United Nations World Food Programme. The warning comes as the United States government, through its envoy in Juba, announced that it was contributing $95 million in additional humanitarian assistance for those affected by ongoing political conflict and extreme food insecurity. Meanwhile, South Sudan has lifted a lockdown it imposed in early February to help contain rising cases of COVID-19, which will allow non-essential businesses to reopen. And in neighboring Uganda, the government has admitted to having more than 1,000 people who were arrested in the run-up to general elections. The Internal Affairs Minister told Parliament most were still in detention. About 18 young men who had been taken from a village in Kyotera, southwest of the capital, Kampala, were released without charge and dumped near the village in the dead of the night. The government's latest response leaves many unanswered questions about the number of people being held and on what grounds and where. Former South African President Jacob Zuma has effectively defied the Constitutional Court, where he is facing charges of contempt of court. A controversial statesman was given 4 days by the country's Chief Justice Mwegeng to depose an affidavit setting out the punishment he should receive if he is found guilty of contempt of court. The charges are linked to him refusing to appear before the Judicial Commission on state capture after the court had ordered him to do so. But in a letter sent to the Chief Justice yesterday, former President Zuma has labelled the treatment that he received as an extraordinary abuse of judicial authority to advance political charge narratives. Now, joining us this evening is journalist and editor Diane Hawker to unpack the latest developments. Hi, good evening, Diane.
Hi, good evening. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Now, the former President, Jacob Zuma, has written quite a lengthy letter, but refuses to submit an affidavit. What issues is he raising?
Well, in his lengthy letter, he's actually making a number of allegations against the members of the judiciary and of the Constitutional Court, accusing them of infringing on his rights. The former president says that he is exercising his right to conscientious objection, and that's a quote from the letter. Saying that he's choosing to not engage in the formal court proceedings because he believes that the Constitutional Court is biased against him. Part of the reason why he's saying this is because of a previous decision made by the court in which he was actually instructed to go and testify at the commission, as well as the fact that the commission, the head of the commission, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, is also a member of the Constitutional Court. And in the letter, the former president says that the Deputy Chief Justice Zondo should not have gone the route of going to the Constitutional Court, but should have rather first had this matter go through other levels of court so that the Constitutional Court could be the last court on this matter. Generally speaking, in South African law, there's the High Court, the Supreme Court of Appeal, and then at the top, the Constitutional Court. And the former president is essentially saying that it doesn't make sense that the Constitutional Court should actually be involved in this matter when there are other courts that could have first been approached to deal with it and then gone to the Constitutional Court as the final arbiter in this matter.
Now, even before this letter, former President Zuma was quite defiant of the court. Why do you think the Chief Justice has given him another opportunity to submit his version? He gave him this opportunity. He has written a lengthy letter. He hasn't addressed what the Chief Justice wanted. So what are the next steps in this letter, since the issue is already at the Constitutional Court, the highest court in the Republic of South Africa?
Well, ultimately, the Constitutional Court will have to make a decision with the information that was presented before it. I think the Constitutional Court was in a bit of a difficult situation because it initially obviously had wanted all the parties to argue before it, and the former president's lawyers and himself actually decided not to partake in those proceedings. So the court only had the argument of the Zondo Commission, as well as some friends of the court who had entered the case to basically say what the court's position should should be. The intention or the request from the Constitutional Court in giving these directives was to get some kind of a voice from the Zuma legal team. But he has made it clear in his letter to the court that he is not intending to even engage with the court. He says that there is judicial overreach, and he also accuses the court of playing politics, and therefore he doesn't want to get involved. So the court will have to ultimately make a decision with what is before it, which would be the arguments from the commission as well as those friends of the court who argued in December last year.
Now, Diane, news reaching us is that more senior politicians have continued to visit former President Jacob Zuma at his home, and we understand the latest is the ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule. What do you make of this visit, and what's this latest visit about?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, since the former President Zuma has initially said that he wouldn't engage in the process, there have been a number of high-level ANC leaders who visited him at his home, including the police minister, other members of the ANC's top 6 leadership, and now the latest would be Ace Magashule, who's the Secretary General, so amongst the very highest leaders in the party. The ANC, in fact, has recently had its own difficulties with there being a resolution calling for any members who've been accused of corruption or any crimes to step aside from their party positions. And the Secretary General, along with the former president, are actually amongst those people who would have to step aside from any party positions if they held any. The official word was that the Secretary General went to visit former President Zuma to get some advice on this step-aside issue. But the background of it really is that there are a number of internal battles going on within the ANC that relate to the leadership race as to who's going to take over. And we can see those spilling into various aspects of our public life here in South Africa.
Now, finally, in 20 seconds, Diane, before I let you go, what's the opposition saying about all of these developments, and does this hurt the African National Congress in any way?
Well, the opposition mainly are actually preparing for local government elections, which are meant to take place later this year. There hasn't been a lot of commentary on what's going on in the ANC, and I suppose that's partly because the ANC is doing a lot of the opposition's job by having their battles spill out into the public space without the opposition really having to do much to bring it to public attention or even to say much about it.
Thank you very much, Diane. We appreciate your contribution as always. Do you have a nice evening?
Thank you so much.
And now to a continued coverage of the coronavirus pandemic across Africa. Madagascar has postponed the reopening of schools previously planned for Monday next week, citing an increase in coronavirus cases. The country's cabinet says schools would remain closed until further notice. Weekly markets in the capital, Antananarivo, have also been suspended. According to data from Johns Hopkins University, Madagascar has so far reported 29,348 coronavirus cases, including 520 deaths. Meanwhile, 4 suspected members of a counterfeit ring producing fake COVID-19 negative certificates have been arrested in Mozambique. This is according to the Southern African country's National Criminal Investigation Service. The gang's operations center around the Ressano Garcia border post, where people need negative COVID-19 results to travel to neighboring South Africa. 3 of those arrested were government health workers. Another was someone who touted their services. The gang charged between $50 and $60 for each test with a guaranteed negative result. You're watching News Central now. Still ahead on the news, Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga departs for the United States for talks with President Joe Biden amidst COVID-19 pandemic. We'll bring you details of this and more after the break. Join us again. The only cure to sexual violence is prevention, and that's according to the UN Special Representative of Sexual Violence in Conflict, Pramila Patten. At a virtual meeting of the United Nations Security Council, Patten presented the findings of her office's 2020 annual report, covering 18 country situations and documents over 2,500 UN-verified cases of conflict-related sexual violence. She called for concerted efforts to ensure that survivors of sexual violence are not obscured beneath the long shadow cast by the COVID-19 pandemic.
It may be many months before we know the full scale and magnitude, the extent and impact of these atrocities. There is no question that this Council has adopted groundbreaking resolutions to combat sexual violence. But the question could be asked, what do these resolutions mean right now on the ground in Tigray? When history looks back on this painful episode as part of the long litany of battles fought on the bodies of women and girls from Bosnia to Rwanda, Iraq, Syria, and elsewhere, we will rightly be asked what we did to honor our commitments. Proactive measures to foster an enabling environment for survivors to safely come forward and seek redress have become more urgent than ever. Many survivors have broken their silence, but many others have been broken by the silence forced upon them. Shame, isolation, rejection, and the anguish of having nowhere to turn has shattered lives and livelihoods. If applied in a timely and consistent manner, sanctions can change the calculus of parties that operate on the assumption that rape is costly or even profitable in the political economy of war, in which women are trafficked, traded, and sold.
Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga has departed for the United States of America for talks with President Joe Biden amid the COVID-19 pandemic and tensions with China. Suga is scheduled to meet President Biden at the White House on Friday, becoming the first foreign leader to meet in person with the United States president since he took office. Tokyo explains the two leaders want to show the strong ties of the Japan-US alliance and their commitment to the Indo-Pacific region. Suga and Biden are expected to discuss climate change, the pandemic, issues related to China and North Korea, and cooperation in the Indo-Pacific region. And up next is business news. The consumer price inflation in Ghana is 10.3% year-on-year in March. The figures released by the Ghana Statistics Services has remained above the central bank's targeted band of 8% plus or minus 2 percentage points since February. Month-on-month inflation between February and March 2021 is 0.9%, which is slightly higher than last month. For March, the food inflation recorded at 10.8%, which is both lower than last month's 12.3% and the average of the previous 12 months at 12.8%. Now, within the space of 4 years, from 2015 to 2019, Ghana has recorded staggering losses to the tune of 4.7 billion Ghanaian cedis in petroleum revenue due to illegal activities in the petroleum distribution. According to Vice President Dr. Mahamadou Bawumia, this has serious negative effects on the development agenda of the government. In a bid to curb the losses, Ghana's National Petroleum Authority has announced that it is leveraging a technology called the Digital Retail Fuel Monitoring System to improve efficiency and effectiveness in the distribution of products downstream. Earlier today on Business Edge, News Central's Nasir Afolabi Agbalaya tells us more about the fuel monitoring system.
Principally, this is like a database of what commodity, the volume which is available, and also what each marketer gets periodically. So by way of this, they can monitor what each person gets and where they take them to. So they know that this is the amount we are expecting from this firm. So there's no case of, we didn't get this, we didn't get that. So there's adequate tracking of the product and an adequate database to know that this is what we have, this is what we've sold to you, this exact amount that we expect you to pay back. So it's a wonderful process, I'd say. Relatively, yes, but not all marketers have started using it yet. Well, the next couple of weeks, I believe that all marketers should log onto it, and so there's the loss will be reduced. That is, if there is no technical fault that develops.
The Central Bank of Libya has revealed in its annual report that China and the European Union were Libya's top trading partners in 2019. The report stated that China ranked first among Libya's trading partners, followed by Italy, Germany, Spain and France. Turkey ranked first as the largest importer, followed by Italy and the United Arab Emirates and Egypt. The value of the exports for the European countries amounted to about 20.549 billion Libyan dinars, representing 53% of the total exports, totaling 38 billion dinars. The figures indicate that Italy received exports amounting to about 6.204 billion Libyan dinars, followed by Germany with about 6.135 billion Libyan dinars, Spain with about 5.73 billion, and France with about 2.37 billion dinars. You're watching News Central now. Up next on sports, we'll be looking at the fight against racism, plus entertainment. Join us more.
And in sports, Slavia Prague's Ondrej Kudela has been banned for 10 matches by UEFA after being found guilty for racist behavior towards Rangers' Glenn Kamara at the Ibrox in the Europa League last month. And a one-match provisional suspension was given to Kudela last week, and this was also included in that sanction. UEFA also banned Kamara for 3 matches after finding he assaulted Kudela in the tunnel after the game. Now, Rangers intend to appeal against Kamara's suspension, which they described as severe. Now, we have the chief scout of the Nigerian national team, Tunde Adelakun, joining us on this one tonight. Good to have you with us. Now, this issue of racism seems endless, and it has raised too much concern. Now, do you think the 10-match ban is enough punishment? Because FIFA executive Alexis Sorokin said the decision is correct.
I will ignore what the FIFA executive said. I will pretend I didn't hear it. I really don't think that there's any argument about it. I think that the 10-match ban is an absolute joke. It's a travesty. For me, it's a slap on the face of everybody who has said one thing or the other against racial injustice in this game and in this world. There's no way a 10-match ban will justify what has happened on that day on the 18th of March.
Now, a senior Czech government minister claims UEFA only handed out a 10-game ban to the player for the abuse on Kamara in order to satisfy the perverted expectations of a small group of activists. How do you think the rest of the world will take this?
I think the rest of the world, not how they will take it, but how they should take it, is to slam this person with as much venom as is possible, because he's trying to play reverse psychology. He's trying to play the victim where there's nothing. And everybody knows what has happened. Everybody knows why it happened, how it happened, and where it came from. We all know that racism in the society is big. And as an extension, racism in football goes there. Now, it is the duty of governments, football associations and clubs to educate their players, to educate their personnel on how to comport themselves when it comes to racial matters. And if a member of a government is saying such nonsense, then I think it should be ignored.
Now, if you were in that position, probably UEFA, what would you do? How would you think will be the best? What would you take as the best punishment for racial behaviors?
I've always said it, and I said it again today. The match that I was watching before I came on set should not be happening at all. Because if I had any way, I'll throw Slavia Prague out of the Europa League immediately and ban them for like a year. Why? Because they need to take responsibility for the actions of their players. And if they can't educate their players enough to know the implication of racial slurs, to know that they are actually supposedly role models whose words, every word is being hung on to by every member of the youth fraternity in Czech Republic, then they have failed. And we have to make them stand up. You see, racism will not go away until we start to hurt the people who are benefiting from football. If we hurt them, if we throw them out of competitions, if we ban them, if we suspend them and ban stadia, they will be the ones who will be watching over their shoulders and telling players how to behave. Right now, we're not doing anything. And that is why it's still here.
True. Now, in the English Premier League, we have club sides who have said that they are going to abort social media for about a week. And I think it's a good one. Kick It Out as well have said that they're going to support all the clubs. And remember, recently we saw Heung-min Son of Tottenham Hotspur suffer racial abuse after they lost to Manchester United. What else can we... I mean, it looks like it is endless. Remember, Crystal Palace's Wilfred Zaha also said that he would not take a knee because it doesn't look like this situation is going to end anytime soon. And in the FA, are they doing enough to ensure that this stops?
I'm afraid none of the football authorities are doing anything near enough to actually protect the sanctity of the game and to protect the sanity of our players. I tell you what, I have worked closely with players for over 20 years. I know the effect of racial slur, of racial abuse. What did Kudela do to Glenn Kamara? He called him an effing monkey. What did the authorities do? They banned him for 10 matches and they banned Kamara for reacting. To being called a monkey for 3 games, which effectively means that he was supposed to actually applaud the fact that he was called a monkey and say thank you very much. Otherwise, he won't be banned. I think the authorities have to understand, and they don't, whether they do and choose to ignore it, which is what I believe, or they don't know, which I feel is very ignorant and means they don't deserve to be where they are. But the truth of the matter is that we have to realize and appreciate what exactly is going on, the impact of what they're doing on our players and on the youth that are the future leaders of tomorrow. Because I tell you, if they do it like this and they get away with it, the next one will be more and more vociferous and more futile and fatal, on the effect and on the sanctity and on the mental state of our football.
Wow. I just hope that this vice would actually come to an end very soon. But I'd like to thank you, the Chief Scout of the Super Eagles, Tunde Adelakun, for joining us on this one.
Thank you.
All right, and that's the most you can take for sports updates. I will hand over to Benga, who brings you the rest of the news.
And thank you very much, Udoka. Tourism is an important economic sector for many countries in Africa. The touristic peculiarity of Africa lies in the wide variety of points of interest, diversity, and multitudes of landscape, as well as its rich cultural heritage. News Central's Amal Kansime gives you the top 5 tourist destinations in Africa.
Africa has her mysteries, and even a wise man cannot understand them, but a wise man respects them. Breathing the air of Africa and actually walking through it can communicate an indescribable sensation. Over the past few years, tourism in Africa has increased as appreciation for our natural tourist attractions has increased immensely. We went ahead to gather the top 5 countries that attract the most tourists. Starting off in the down south, we have South Africa, which is a tourist destination for many foreigners both within and outside Africa. One of the most famous tourist attractions in South Africa are the South African Cape Winelands, which have around 560 wineries and 4,400 primary producers, containing Route 61, which is considered the longest wine route in the world. Away from South Africa, we head straight to East Africa as we look at the beauty that is Uganda. Uganda, popularly known as the Pearl of Africa, is a popular tourist attraction, well known for beautiful sights like the Rwenzori Mountains. The beautiful snow-capped range of mountains is a famous tourist attraction. Its unique flora gives travelers a semblance of a fairy tale hiking scene. We had the opportunity to speak to Miss Lily Ajarova, the CEO of the Uganda Tourism Board, and Lisa Kanyomozi, who is one of the major ticketing agents in Uganda.
The tourism sector in Uganda is a very significant significant sector for the development of the economy. The tourism sector in Uganda was performing very well before we went into the lockdown with the coronavirus pandemic. We had registered in 2019 1.5 million international arrivals into the country, which translated into 1.6 billion US dollars in earnings from tourism. And we had up to about 700,000 Ugandans who are directly employed in the tourism businesses.
Internationally, we do have to look at reducing ticket prices and bringing in offers, probably pairing with people that are key industry players. I know there's places like Murchison Falls, places like Ginger. So looking for ways to use that as a way to attract people to come and visit Uganda. But also, I think we should also look at promoting local tourism within Uganda, and that could possibly mean cutting prices, giving offers to Ugandans, having local set prices versus international prices that would bring Ugandans to travel more within their country.
Staying in East Africa, we now head to Kenya, which has for years been a major tourist attraction, well known for its wildlife, with a major sites like Nairobi National Park, which has wildlife like lions, elephants, rhinos, and so much more. Straight to North Africa is Morocco, which is well known for the Kutobia Mosque, also known as a bookseller's mosque, which was founded in the 12th century. It is considered a classic and an important example of the Almohad architecture and of Moroccan mosque architecture generally. Bringing you straight to West Africa is Ghana, which is well known for the Cape Coast Castle, which was once one of the world's most important slave-holding sites. The horrifying history of this Cape Castle has made it one of the most sought-after tourist attractions in Africa. Now, Africa is full of countries with so many tourist attractions, and we just couldn't help but give you one more. We can't talk about tourist attractions without mentioning the underground churches found in Ethiopia. Lalibela is a large and important site for antiquity, medieval, and post-medieval civilization of Ethiopia, making it a famous site for tourists to visit. And that's all we have for you on the countries with the most tourist attractions. Please feel free to let us know which country you think has the most tourist attractions in your own opinion. We will be waiting to hear. Thank you.
Now for the latest weather update across the continent. Residents of Lagos, Nigeria and Nairobi in Kenya may be experiencing some thunderstorms tomorrow, while it promises to be a bright and sunny day in Johannesburg, South Africa. For the rest of what the weather will look like in some major cities across Africa, let's go to our weather desk. And that concludes our primetime news at this hour. But before we go, let's bring you a recap of our top stories. Mali's interim government to hold presidential and parliamentary elections next year. United Nations World Food Programme warns of potential famine in South Sudan. And we told you that the Ugandan government has admitted detaining over 1,000 people in the run-up to January's elections. Remember, you can follow us on social media. We're at News Central TV. You can also catch up with our news and programs. Just download the News Central TV mobile app on Play Store and iOS. You can also watch us live on StarTimes channel 274. Many thanks for watching. I am Benga Aboroa.